Okay, so we're gonna be recording the event here tonight just in case we need to come back and review anything, but we can also pass it on to some other producers. So thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time out tonight to join us to talk a little bit about this exciting program between CANZA and Ontario Corn-Fed Beef. Might have heard a little bit about it, but we're hopefully going to walk through the program here tonight, give you some background information around kind of the evolution of our program and how we've been kind of focusing on uh, adding value to our producers through quality assurance and the opportunity that this CANZA project gives for us here. Since the inception, the Ontario Corn-Fed Beef Program was started in 2001, and since that its inception, we've really strived to meet the demands of a changing consumer base. How do we ensure consistently great tasting beef based on the blueprints that we had around following strict production standards for animal health, animal welfare, animal nutrition. And those have really been the key elements of the program moving forward throughout the years. But within the last 5, 6 years or so, there's been more of a focus on things like environmental impact and how do we address and deliver all those things around what consumers want balanced against what our animals need in order to deliver what consumers want. And the growing concern around some of the environmental impact of livestock production and how do we do that with less and how do we lessen our environmental impact? So that's kind of where we've been, the evolution of our program. It's kind of led us into developing our model on the pillars around sustainably raised Ontario corn-fed beef. We look at, sustainability really has three fundamental components to it, economical, environmental, and social. When we look at some of the areas around economic viability, we want to make sure that we're building a strong foundation for Ontario family farms for generations to come, making sure that everything we do is environmentally sound, that we're conserving and enhancing the land, the water, and the air for future generations. On the social side, making sure that we're caring for our animals, our families, and our communities. And that's where most models around sustainability end is on those three components. But a big one for us is really the fourth component of that, and that's continuous improvement. We believe that sustainability is a journey, not a destination. So we focus on, how do we continue to work with and collaborate with all of our industry partners, our supply chain partners, some NGOs that are aligned with industry as well as our government, and how do we use those to continuously evolve, learn, and adapt, and add value back to not just our Ontario corn-fed beef brand, but also to our producers who produce the brand. So when you look at our model, we utilize it's something that's kind of unique in beef production, especially in Canada and in fact all of North America, is that we utilize a program that's more of a model of circularity, and that integrates crop production for cattle feed, which provides us for great tasting beef, along with those standard operating procedures around animal health, animal welfare, animal nutrition, but also as well as managing soil nutrients and manure management, and those things that contribute to enhancing the soil organic matter and sequestering nitrogen and carbon into the soil. That's a very unique system in beef production here in North America, like I said, but it's pretty much standardized across Ontario and Ontario corn-fed, where the bulk or the vast majority, if not the overwhelming majority, of our cattle producers are also crop farmers that feed and grow the vast majority of the crop inputs for their cattle feed. But a key focus on that again is within our model is on continuous improvement for our producers. Again, we're focusing on that collaboration with industry partners, NGOs, as well as government. And that's where we've led us to this, the project we want to talk to you here tonight is around CANZA's Million Acre Challenge program. We really feel that it's an opportunity for our producers to work towards regenerative farming and generate some additional revenue streams. We're going to talk a little bit about, regenerative farming and how we implement those and can add some of those into our everyday best or beneficial management practices on our farms. One of I guess the best outcomes that we see is adding tangible value to Ontario corn-fed beef, and that's through being able to have measurable environmental and sustainability outcomes. And that's not something that we're able to do on our own, is providing verifiable and measurable outcomes. So the CANZA alignment is very, very important to us, and we'll talk a little bit about that here tonight. And as well as what it really provides us is an opportunity to get beyond the meat case and beyond the meat category. We have partners in the retail sector, we have partners in food service sector, and it's all about the quality of the meat and the consistency and the quality of the meat. But we have a really unique opportunity with Ontario corn-fed beef because of our model here. We have a real opportunity to be able to support our brand partners and help them deliver on their corporate ESG goals. And if you're not aware of ESG, it means environmental sustainability and governance. Those are really important factors that corporations place on themselves. And that's in their how they measure themselves and report back to their shareholders about what they're doing around those three key elements. But it also has an ability for us to do something that no other beef production program can do, and that's work with our partners on helping them with their Scope 3 emission goals. Scope 3 emissions are basically any corporation, your environmental, some of the environmental measures, but they would be related to your supply chain. And in most instances, most corporations wouldn't be able to have no ability to impact what their supply chain Scope 3 emissions goals. So that gives us a unique opportunity to work with our brand partners to give them additional value that goes beyond the meat case. And that certainly adds additional value back to the brand as well as the producers. When we look at if our Ontario corn beef and adding value through value creation, our model really starts on the farm, and it's the foundational elements of how we create all the value and how we leverage that in creating our differentiation and innovation in the marketplace. Our on-farm quality assurance program enables us to deliver consistent quality. It enables us to talk about claims around animal health, animal welfare, some of the sustainability and the circularity model that I talked about. This project will help us expand that project and talk more about specific environmental outcomes through verifications, all done through our SOP and audits, as well as the measurement tools that will be talked about here in our program here today. It helps us define and develop our brand story. Our brand story for Ontario corn-fed beef, it's more about who we are, what we do, and why it matters. And this level takes us. We're able to take our value proposition and expand it to a breadth and depth that we've never been able to before, and no other beef program could possibly do. And it also is a foundation for us to be able to work closely with our industry and government, and helps us with our collaboration and our partnerships with either our packer partners or our up or downstream partners, both within the domestic market as well as the export market, and enables us to capture value. And again, that flows back upstream, back to the producers. It's one of the things that this project helps us fill the gap, and that's around verified measures. And again, that's one thing that we're very it'd be very difficult for us to be able to develop things that would be verifiable to the level and to the extent that we would need them to be. Partnering with someone like CANZA, it gives us access to be able to develop or to work and access the MMRV system, which is monitor, measure, results, and verification program, which is being developed through parallel programs that CANZA has, and that provides verified measures related to some environmental outcomes that are generated through some of the regenerative practices that we'll talk about, and ultimately benefit the OCFB program as well as the individual producers. So, what is regenerative agriculture? The term really refers to agriculture practices that are designed to, number one, address the challenges posed by a changing climate. Number two is really to minimize its impact on agriculture productivity. Again, talking about that less environmental footprint. And number three, to reduce GHG emissions. Probably the single most issue that the industry is kind of seen upon in a negative light. But when we talk about the terminology regenerative agriculture. It really falls in, it really means the same thing around things like different groups of terms such as, climate smart, ecological, sustainable, conservation, holistic. They're all relatively the same. Most of them, they all share that common philosophy, focusing on those pillars that we talked about of sustainability within social, economic, and environmental. And they produce resource stewardship. They're focusing on making sure that we have uh, beneficial management practices in place. Some of the areas that would be impacted through regenerative agriculture, areas like soil health, water, biodiversity, and climate. When you're individually and you talk about that around soil, some of the outcomes would be enhancing soil structure, fertility, biological activity, promote nutrient cycling, water retention, carbon sequestration, which all lead to more resilient and productive ecosystems. From a water perspective, ensuring optimal use, reducing runoff, pollution, enhancing water retention in the soil, maintaining a balanced water cycle, and support long-term sustainability of agriculture and some of the ecosystems. From a biodiversity perspective, promoting diversity of species and ecosystems, like go above and as well as below ground, support pollination, pest control, genetic resilience, and preventing habitat and invasive species. And overall, from a climate perspective, is minimizing greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing carbon sequestration, at the same time enabling the farms to adapt to a climate change and support resilient farming systems and communities. So it's kind of really what we're talking about when we're talking about regenerative agriculture. Those are the impact areas and some of the terms or the outcomes of what we're looking towards. Some of the examples of what regenerative practices would be, and this is more of the things that you guys would actually do, within the cropping sector. You can see the list on the left. A lot of those terms mean a lot more to you than they do to me. So I'm sure you know what these mean a lot more than I do. I won't bother reading through them, but I'll just kind of leave them there for you. You can see a lot of those things I know are fairly straightforward and fairly standardized practices that are utilized. And maybe they're things that, maybe you're not using some of those practices right now, but with a little bit of with a little incentive, maybe you'd be interested in taking on something like that. And in a list like this is not all inclusive. That if there's ever any other suggestions for additional track practices that you'd like to trial, you can suggest those and bring them forward. As long as those practices, they should bring some environmental benefits, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions or increased carbon soil sequestration or improving water quality or some biodiversity enhancements, some of those types of deliverables. So who's CANZA? CANZA, we actually have Emily Robinson from CANZA is here tonight. So if we have any questions that I can't answer on the project, we'll toss it over to CANZA and tell you. CANZA's been around since I guess incorporated since 1986, but around since 2023 here, and they bring together Canadian agri-food sector to advance a more resilient food system. They're part of a solution space called Generate Canada, which is an independently corporation or corporate incorporated charity. Sorry. Their vision is for a resilient agri-food system that secures long-term productivity for farmers, ensuring food security for our communities, and showcases competitiveness and leadership of Canada's entire agri-food system. And I can tell you the competitiveness component of that is very important for us in international markets. So that Canada is seen as being as a leader in agri-food and sustainability. Their mission is important to us because it's around driving investment and advancing climate smart solutions for a more resilient system. And I think CANZA brings a really important aspect to the table here in this project, and that's how do we get there? And they really bring farmers and diverse industry partners together to coordinate and advance investment and solutions that de-risk and even reward farmers for adopting of regenerative practices and some of those positive environmental impacts from the efforts that you put in. They've got a large, diverse group of strategic partners. From their founding partners, some major retail chains, food companies, financial, as you can see, some of their champions as leaders and academia and policy related partners. Wanted to talk a little bit specifically around the projects that we're involved with here. One is the Million Acre Challenge. This is the real exciting opportunity here, and that CANZA is really building two interconnected opportunities for farmers, and that's the Million Acre Challenge, as well as working towards an environmental outcomes marketplace. The intention of these initiatives is to de-risk and reward farmers' adoption of those BMPs that help sequester carbon, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve water quality, and support biodiversity. I think very straightforward. Um, the fact of bringing forward the initiatives that help de-risk and reward farmers. That's likely the biggest issue in advancing some of the processes. The first program on the Million Acre Challenge and participation in this program. This program is focused on corn farmers in southwestern Ontario. We'll talk a little bit about that. You can receive cost share payments and agronomic support for 3 years when adopting some of these new BMPs that we'll talk through here. Um, that program will run for 3 years and will evolve into a program called the Environmental Outcomes Marketplace. So after you complete the participation in the Million Acre Challenge program, then transition into the marketplace where you can now market those environmental outcomes, whether they be measurable reduction in GHG emissions or reductions, water quality improvements, biodiversity enhancements, all the advancements that you generated through the adoption of the BMPs. So program number one, again, on the Million Acre Challenge. So again, the incentives that pay, the idea is to de-risk the adoption of some of these beneficial management practices by providing farmers with cost share payments for each practice change, or even just utilizing some of the practices that are already being in place, because some of yous are already, fairly well advanced in some of these, and would just be more of putting a measurement process in place. Be supported with 3 years of payments on the same acres each year, which we'll talk a little bit about. They'll also be working with the Sustainable Food Lab to help train local agronomists on regional specific needs. If you already have relationships with an agronomist, then we can still utilize your own relationships that you have in place, and connect them back up to the Sustainable Food Lab so that the information flow up and down. So the demonstration program, step one, it's starting with, as I said, it's starting with corn in southwestern Ontario. Mostly it's a high impact region embedded with supply chains, a lot of supply chains for feed, food, fuel, food, and exports. And I guess because of the concentration here, 25% of corn acres in Southwest Ontario can influence about 85% of corn acres in total region. I guess you see opportunities around higher GHG savings per acre versus other crops, and we also have that concurrent impact on the Ontario corn-fed beef supply chain too. Estimated emissions reduction is a potential of 865,000 metric tons of carbon. So if you look at the box in the middle in the years 1 through 4, year one, the total project is looking for about 14,500 acres with about 24 farmers to be enrolled in year one, and then expanding into years 2, 3, and 4, for a total at the end of year 4 of about 350 and collectively about 614 farms altogether, and representing about 265,000 acres of corn in the province. Out of that, we've been working with CANZA, and CANZA has kind of allocated 20 of those 24 farms to be OCFB producers, and about 9,500 out of that 14,500 acres. And we do want to have a bit of a variety in size and scope and geographic regions. So we've sent the invites out kind of strategically for year one so that we could still have we can kind of grow naturally into years two and 3. So we're looking at, there's openings for about 5 farms with about 300 acres dedicated or allocated to the program, 5 farms at about 400 acres, and 10 farms with about 600 acres allocated to the program. And that would be, again, for year one. So on the first phase, again, they're seeking 24 flagship farms to be the first, what they call the first cohorts in the Million Acre Challenge program. So it'll be a smaller group, highly engaged group of farmers, and really what we're going to be asking to is help champion the program and engage in some of the knowledge transfer and translation activities, kind of work within the agronomist services, and work to provide the measurements and some data and talk about some of the practices. As a result, that have a big influence in helping to develop the list of best management practices that are offered so far in the program. And we talked about if you have any other suggestions that could be added in, be certainly willing to look at some of that. As far as the funding available for the program, so in year one, for 600 acres, be looking at about 18,000 for a 600 acre participant, be about 18,600. Year two, 15,000. Year three, 7,500. So for total for 3 year participation, you're looking at about $41,000 for a 600 acre participation. Um, and then so at the end of the project completion, which will be in April in 2029, at the end of the demo program, then anyone who's completed that program can now just transition into the environmental outcomes marketplace, which would be launched coming out of this program. Um, on work stream two, that's the environmental outcomes marketplace. There's really three kind of streams around that. That's be underway. That would be completed by the end of that 3 years. Developing the platform and the systems development, developing the investor campaign, um, attracting the investment, those types of things, and developing the business model around roles and responsibilities, some of the data ownership, and some of the financial architecture around that. So these things will all kind of be developed and concurrently, as well as the Million Acre Challenge. So we look at environmental outcomes. So what are environmental outcomes? Or the adoption of sustainable practice that benefits the farm, the environment, and the society. Some of those things would be some basic, measurements that would include things like increased soil carbon sequestration and how you get there, whether that be through things like cover cropping or some other practices that would be beneficial to that. Reduce GHG emissions, and it could be the use of 4R stewardships or nitrogen fertilizer application. There could be some other things in there, around manure management, those types of things that would have some benefits around that. Improved water quality, again, reducing opportunities for nutrient runoff or leaching and those types of things, and increased biodiversity. Um, so if we generate these environmental outcomes, we do all these things and we document them and we measure them and we create environmental outcomes. Well, what do we do with them now? Well, we do know that there is interest in corporations that are companies such as agri-food value chains, food processors, food retailers, those types of companies that are seeking to meet their sustainability goals. And I talked a little bit earlier about some of the scope three uh, emission goals, as well as some of their scope two ones which they're actually generating some carbon against. So they're looking for a way that they can do this through working with their supply chains and suppliers to help them sequester carbon and reduce their GHG emissions on their behalf and improve water quality and support diversity. So a lot of governments, conservation authorities, environmentals, NGOs are interested in supporting farmers to adopt some of those BMPs. And they could be outside food industry as well, like energy companies that are interesting, and they're looking to be able to purchase environmental outcomes to offset their environmental footprint. So that's where, by generating in the Million Acre Challenge program is developing the tools and the measurement criteria so that we can deliver the environmental outcomes. The second part of the project will now be, take those outcomes and monetize them and work with CANZA to find those investment partners that are interested to look for those offsets. So how does that work? The first phase of the platform will be operation, where farmers will leverage the platform to learn about those existing corporate government and philanthropic financial incentive programs for the adoption of regenerative practices. CANZA has brought an investor to this project. The dollars that we talked about are all sourced through a private investment that CANZA has brought to the table, and maybe I'll leave that for Emily if she wants to talk more about that. So essentially, we're just looking for producers that want to apply to participate in the program, and it's essentially just signing a non-binding, non-legal a contract, just more of a letter of intent that you want to participate in the program, and then work with the agronomists in providing the necessary data that's required to be inputted, and then helping do the base measurements. So you begin with in the program where you receive some cost share payments, as we talked about, as well as provided that agronomic support, whether it's provided for you or if you already have an existing relationship, we can utilize your relationship as well. In the first year, the CANZA team, they'll want to take some baseline measurements just so we can figure out kind of where we're at. Just do some soil carbon testing. And those tests they align with some of the industry standards that are in place. Also share some of the basic information around some of the practices that you're already implementing through the program. As we go through the process and in the fourth year, after 3 years is up, they'll assist you with remeasuring, and after that you can opt to enter into the marketplace where you can market the outcomes that you've generated, and ultimately accessing an additional revenue stream for your own operation. The one good thing about this project specifically is that there's stacking opportunities, is that Kansas facilitated collaboration among other existing initiatives that they have to also stack opportunities for things like carbon, water, biodiversity outcomes. So that would even allow you to have higher payments from the same acres. So instead of just being able to sell, say, carbon off or carbon sequestration or something, you'd be able to add on some water and some biodiversity outcomes. So you're being stacking on some financial opportunities off of the same acres without adding anything different on top of that. So the next steps, I guess, for us is we need to confirm the 20 participating certified corn-fed feedlots. We'd like to have that done at the latest by the end of October. So this is our first outreach into to producers. Looking for just a signed producer letter of intent. Again, it's a non-binding letter of intent, but we are hoping to have people signed up and ready to go. And then you can just simply review the beneficial management practices. That's basically that list that I showed you earlier. That's the list that's on there now, and just talking about which of those practices that you're currently implementing and which ones you maybe consider implementing down the road. And at this point, we've got 18 spots remaining for 1 year. We have different, again, kind of allocations. We have 8 spots at 600 acres, 5 at 400 acres, and 5 at 300 acres that we'd be looking to fill again by the end of October 2025. So I guess that I'd leave it there and just wondering. I know I kind of blew through this fairly quickly, but we do have CANZA representation on the call if there's any questions that I can't address, and hopefully Emily would be open and willing to take those questions for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can just say hello as well. So just
Yeah.
thanks everyone for listening. And as John said, we've been working together pretty closely over the last couple months to just sort of identify how this program can be as helpful as possible to you as producers. So yeah, very open just to hear any questions or ways that we can be supportive through this process. And yeah, happy to answer anything, or John can take questions.
No questions? Chris, you got to have a question. You always got questions. You're muted.